Difficult and painful as it is, we must walk on the days ahead with an audacious faith in the future. If you cannot fly, then run. If you cannot run, then walk. If you cannot walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep on moving forward. And when darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. The special edition of Second City Sports on this MLK Day starts right now. Welcome to the special edition of Second City Sports. You're locked and loaded and live in the living color right here on Sports Soul Chicago. Along with Miss Lakeem McGee, which is she. I am Cindy Brown. You know that it's me. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at CK80. Once again, it's CK80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow my Kenny McGee on the Twitter, X, and IG.
Be sure to download that Sports Zone Chicago app wherever you get your apps. Please follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, and YouTube. Please subscribe to our podcast. We're located at War Media Podcast. That's WARR Media, PODCASTS. We are on all podcast platforms, including the iHeartRadio app. And while you're at it, please give War Media a follow at WARR Media on all social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, and YouTube. And thank you very much in advance for your support.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
We are unapologetically fun, and we have very definite opinions. If you have any definite opinion during our 2-hour extravaganza we call a Sports Talk Radio Show, you can definitely hit us up at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in those questions or comments in the comment section. Lakina will get them up on the screen for you. But you decide to troll and or do something silly, dumb, or stupid, I've given Lakina full powers to give you Dumbos, the bill, and beer boot.
Toodles.
But before we begin, we must remind you whether you watch us live on our Facebook and YouTube channels or you're catching us on the replay. Shout out to the replay gang. We are always here for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And you know we will provide.
And we're finding you with some of the best to try to keep you guys warm here on Second City Sports. I'm sure it's cold in most parts of the country, so we'll try to keep it warm. Hope you're somewhere safe. And if you do have to work outside today, try to keep warm. Keep hot beverages handy and such. So keep it going there. And also too, as Sid, that was one of the great quotes from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Of course, it's MLK Day. So if you are off today and you're watching us for the first time, hello. How are you guys? Stay warm and tell your friends about us. So, of course, we're going to have the legendary WBEZ sports reporter Cheryl Raye Stout to join us to talk. We can share stories with her for days. I'm sure she'll share some great stories here. She'll also give her thoughts on the Bears coaching search, Cubs moves, White Sox, Bulls, Blackhawks, and a whole lot more. Also, we'll talk about the Bulls, as not a good start to their West Coast road trip and the rest of the NBA. The Illini suffered a tough loss in East Lansing and the rest of the college hoops this weekend. A double dose of a special edition of Old School TV Monday. And, of course, we'll preview tonight's national title game in college football between Ohio State and Notre Dame. But first, Sid, let's go to the NFL as we'll start with Saturday's games first. The Chiefs beat the Texans 23-14. They're going back to the AFC Championship game for the third straight year and the seventh time in the last 9 years. And Pat Mahomes 177 yards and a touchdown. The defense for the Chiefs were the real story because they sacked C.J. Stroud 8 times. Joe Mixon, looked like the knee was okay, 88 rushing yards, but again, you can say that there were a couple of calls here and there that perhaps that'll feed to the narratives, but at the same time though, the Texans had their shot to try to perhaps maybe make this a game. They just weren't able to do it.
Yeah, with six first half points, you figured that Texas were coming in the second half. They did with Joe Mixon scoring the only touchdown of the game for the Texans. But I want to go back to you brought up the elephant in the room, no pun intended, the Patrick Mahomes play. He was barely touched, and then the referees called the flag on Will Anderson. I know he had a big comment after the game saying that the Houston Texans knew where they're up against it was them against everybody else, i.e. the referees and everybody else. But here's the thing that we talked about all year with Kansas City. They bank on you to make the mistakes. And once you do,
Hmm.
they turn around and talk about the Chiefs and make you pay for it. And that's what happened on Saturday night. Now, they did get a big contribution from Travis Kelsey. He had 7 catches for over 100 yards and a touchdown as well. As we talked about him being on the other side of his career, in which he is, but he's still very productive. But the Chiefs do not have a strong offense. We said this last year. They don't have a big playmaker. I know they got DeAndre Hopkins, but we all know that he's way past his prime. You don't have a Rasheed Rice. Xavier Worthy still trying to find himself the rookie wide receiver out of Texas. So you do have some talent on all of us at wide receiver, but you don't expect them to have a breakout performance. On the flip side for Houston, Joe Mixon, as I said all year, he makes a Houston Texans offense go. I know Nico Collins got nicked up and all that, but C.J. Stroud, we started to see this toward the end of the year when Tate Dell got injured when they played the Chiefs in the regular season. Once C.J. Stroud doesn't have his second guy to go to, he's crumbling under pressure. You saw that last Saturday night.
Yeah, and I saw that play, and of course that was just a terrible call. And I know, like I said, Will Anderson had a lot to say after that, but even still, I mean, look, you still had your shot chances to win that, to at least make it interesting if you were the Texans. And look, unfortunately, you just couldn't, get it going there. Your defense just wasn't able to. Make the stops when they had to, and you can tell that all those injuries, from Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell, that all kind of came back to bite them in the butt, unfortunately, for the Texans. So, unfortunately, again, they lose to the Chiefs, and now they've got to think about what they got to do within the next within the next off season. So we'll see what happens with them now. Probably one of the bigger upsets this weekend was the NFC side of the divisional round. You had the Commanders beating the Lions, upsetting the Lions, I should say, 45-31. Jay Daniels had 299 yards and pass for 2 TDs. Brian Robinson Jr. rushed for 77 yards and a TD. Jay Daniels also had 51 rushing yards there. 313 yards for Jared Goff for a touchdown, but he also had an interception. Um, Jameer Gibbs had 105 rushing yards and 2 TDs. Jameson Williams had a rushing TD as well. St. Brown 137 yards. But again, this is actually one of the longest droughts, from the AFC, from the title game, and such. The Commanders break that streak at 30. This is going to be their first time going back into the NFC title game in 33 years, and it's just remarkable at that point. We'll talk about that at the tail end, but. First, I mean, the Lions. I have a lot to say about the Lions, but I want to hear from you what you thought about that game, Saturday, Sid.
Shout out to the Commanders' defense by forcing 5 turnovers, including 3 interceptions from Jared Goff. He did not have a good game for the Lions. And remember what we said on last Friday's show with our girl Christine, the Queen Manica. As I know we all picked Detroit, but I said Washington would keep this close. Well, they did more than keep it close. They were dominant from start to finish, even though they had that 28 point outburst in the second quarter. They kept their foot on the pedal. And I also said this too on our show last Friday. I want somebody else from that Washington Commanders running back department to step up. Jaden Daniels, as I said, when they clinched the playoffs against Atlanta, they got away with it. Jaden Daniels leading the team in rushing. Last week against Tampa, he led the team in rushing. Somebody, whether it was Jeremy Nichols, Austin Eckler, or Brian Robinson Jr., as you mentioned, one of those guys had to step up. All three of those guys stepped up last Saturday night to take the load off of Jaden Daniels as far as rushing is concerned. The Lions, I know Robertson, one of their defensive backs, suffered an early injury, which put a nail
Mm-hmm.
in their coffin. But the Washington Commanders are playing with so much confidence right now. It is scary. Shout out to head coach Dan Quinn. They were playing with confidence on both sides of the ball, and the Lions didn't know what hit them. So my key to that victory for the Washington Commanders was it was a running back committee of those three running backs I just mentioned, taking that pressure off of Jane Daniels and having an effective rushing attack. Now on the flip side for Detroit, Jameer Gibbs did very well. You could tell that David Montgomery, who made his return back after missing 3 weeks with that sprained MCL, Jameer Gibbs did score 2 touchdowns off 105 yards rushing, but you could tell after those early couple of early turnovers, especially from Jared Goff, it was going to be a long night for the Lions playing catch up, and that's exactly what happened.
32 years, I should say, that was tied with the Browns and the Dolphins for the longest drought between conference championship games. The Commanders break that streak, for their first NFC championship game since '92. Now, as far as this, I mean, yeah, there were actually a couple of things about that, and I'll get to that when we get to our studs and duds after the break. Some of the stuff that they were doing, look, the fact that Teddy Bridgewater were able to kind of had a couple of chances. Unfortunately, they had a fumble there, and then that kind of stalled that drive. But 28 points, giving up, and unfortunately for the defense, especially, once they lost one of their corners. That was a big, get it kind of, give Eric Glenn credit, but at the same time, though, you figured that it was going to come back to bite in the butt, and that is what happened with the Commanders. So I'm gonna say something about that offense over Detroit and our sets and does, but yeah, the Commanders, give them credit. I mean, they were playing with house money, and look, they felt that they had perhaps had a little window here, and they did 28 points, just incredible, and look, I mean, Jane Dales continues to kind of make history, and it's sort of one of those things where I think it's going to be interesting to see, especially since they're going to be playing one. Well, I'll tease it after the break, but who they're going to play in the NFC title game. But even still, I mean, that's going to be interesting to see what happens on Sunday. But yeah, I mean, if you're the Commanders, you're kind of playing with house money. Shout out to Adam Peters, the GM, and the ownership group. With Magic Johnson, you saw how excited he got after the game. So just a really a great game by the Commanders, like surprising a lot of people, and I think people are kind of taking notice now.
Yeah, and also too, let's give a big shout out to Terry McLaurin. I know we had a couple of guests on from the Washington D.C. area over the years. So Natalie Spaulding, of course, Julie Donaldson, who's back working in that market now. We had those folks like that on our show during the years whenever the now Commanders played the Bears, and we talked about Terry McLaurin being one of those best underrated wide receivers in the league. I know he doesn't give a whole lot of pub because he's not a me first guy. He's not on all the billboards. He's not spraying around on social media like that, like some other people are. But this guy continues to be productive year in, year out. He had a couple big catches, including the one big catch that let the Commanders score that last touchdown, which made them reach 45 points. So I want to give out a shout out to him as well. Now he's going to the NFC Championship game. Hopefully, more people who haven't paid attention to him all these years now he'll get the proper respect that he deserves.
He actually, joins Joe Flacco as the only two rookies to be a number one seed in the playoffs, and Joe Flacco being the other one. He did it with the Ravens beat the Texans back in 2009. So I think people are starting to kind of take notice of Daniels now. So we'll see even more stuff coming up. So we're gonna take a really quick break. Of course, we're gonna talk about the other two games that came on yesterday. One that kind of what we expected, and the other one, well, I'm sure we'll talk about that coming up next. And we'll also preview tonight's national championship game. Yeah, the national championship game in college football between Notre Dame and Ohio State. We'll preview that as well coming next. Keenan McGee, Cindy Brown, Second City Sports, Sports of Chicago. More football talk coming up right after this.
This year, my mom got me the perfect bag for back to school.
These colorful binders help me stay organized.
These headphones are just what I need for studying.
These new sneakers are just what I need for the new year.
This jacket is a real must-have.
My parents got me the skateboard I wanted. It's pretty cool.
These scissors really come in handy in art class.
These colored pencils, too.
These new socks, they can be a real lifesaver. I finally got my own phone to stay in touch with my mom.
Trisha's having a sleepover tonight. Can I go?
I wonder about Lucy's friends. What should I say? I know you're only 10, but one of these days a friend will offer you a drink. And alcohol at your age can lead to so many things. None of them good.
So can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me
I
something.
finished my homework.
Bigger promise. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you. Your real friends won't care. Deal?
Sure.
Really?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Hey, this is Dr. J, and I listen to Sean and Maya in the morning.
Welcome back to the special edition of Second City Sports on this MLK Day, the Reverend honoring the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This is a live show, folks. This is not a recording. You're locked and loaded and live in the living color right here on Sports Zone Chicago. I'm Sid. That's Lakina. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at CK80. Once again, it's CK80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow my Keenan McGee on the Twitter, Execute and IG.
We have less than 85 minutes left or so in this extravaganza we call a sports talk radio show. If you have any questions or comments for us as we continue to review the NFL playoffs from divisional weekend, you can hit us up at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or at Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in those questions or comments to the comment section. The kingdom will get the up on the screen for you.
Off to yesterday's games in the divisional round. The Eagles hold off the Rams 28-22 in a snowy Philadelphia. We saw the snow, it started snowing right around like the halfway through the third quarter, and it was total almost whiteout conditions. But Jalen Hurts 128 yards, no TDs. But the real story was Mr. Saquon Barkley, 205 yards, 2 TDs. And on the flip side, Matt Stafford had 324 yards and 2 TDs, but it was really the defense. Well, Kyron Williams did have 106 rushing yards, but it was really the defense because both defenses combined for 12 sacks. So it was really a tough physical game. And you think, Hurts, who got sacked 7 times, got a little bit banged up. Now Stafford, he was sacked 5 times, but it was really Saquon Barkley that kind of put the Eagles on his back, led the charge, and now they're going back to the NFC title game. He's actually becomes the first NFL player in history with 4 rushing TDs of 60-plus yards against a single opponent in his entire career, including the playoffs. All 4 of those TDs, in those 2 games. Of course, he had 2 other TDs, and that's up front earlier in their first meeting. So, Sid, what did you think about this game yesterday?
Let's get, even though the Rams do not practice or play in snow, let's give them credit for hanging tough and giving all they had to the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
I know Kyron Williams, you just mentioned, he had over 100 yards rushing, but that fumble in the fourth quarter, at the start of the fourth quarter, in my opinion, turned that game around, was one of the turning points that helped turn that game around for Philadelphia. Number 2, when both those teams, especially in that third quarter, went inside the red zone. They couldn't punch it in as far as scoring touchdowns. Both of those teams traded in field goals. But let's give that Rams defense credit. Like you said, they sacked Jalen Hurts 7 times. That Verse kid, I know you talked about him all season long. He had a heck of a game yesterday. I know you say he truly hated the Philadelphia fans, and some of the fans were giving it to him during pregame, but he showed out yesterday. I thought he put on a great show. And let's not forget Bobby Brown III. No, not the singer from New Edition, but he's a very talented young defensive end as well. We talked about them coming into the year. Who's going to take the place of Aaron Donald? No one can really take the place of Aaron Donald, but those two young guys really have anchored that young front for the Los Angeles Rams on the defensive line. Now, offensively, Philadelphia didn't really look that great again yesterday. Like you said, they were saved by Saquon Barkley. I know Dallas Goedert had a couple of great catches in there as well, but even though we talked about this last week too on the show, some fans complain about Jalen Hurts not having that breakout game. But when you have Saquon Barkley perform like that, it only benefits Jalen Hurts. I wish we had that consistently to have that problem here in Chicago. We'll get to that later with our guest Cheryl Raye Stout next hour. But when you have champagne problems like that for Philadelphia, why are you complaining? This only helps Jalen Hurts down the road. I'm just saying.
Well, yeah, the fact that I know he got a little bit banged up. I know his knee got a little bit banged up here with one of those sacks. Now, look, I know Braden Fisk. I think he left early on with a knee injury. Hopefully, he's okay. But look, they've got a great, crop of young guys, so they're only going to get better. That defense. So, yeah, I think their future is right for the Rams. Especially, they're definitely going to give. They're definitely going to challenge the NFC West again next year. Now, as far as Eagles are concerned, I mean, look, Hurts didn't have his best showing, but again, that's why you got Saquon Barkley, 205 rushing yards for them. And it's going to be interesting with the Eagles. I mean, look, like I said, they didn't have their best. They're going to be facing a very familiar opponent. It's going to be their third meeting with Washington, so that's going to be kind of like the thing where it's hard to beat. Look, they were actually close in their second meeting, so I'm wondering, if you're going to use that. These teams know each other well, so I'm looking forward to that game on Sunday because that's really going to be a testament to which team can make the big play. It's so they can advance their peeps to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, like you mentioned, we'll dive more deep into that matchup coming up on our show on Friday. But from the outskirts of it, looking at this the NFC title matchup, you mentioned about that last meeting. Don't forget the Commanders knocked out Jalen Hurts early, and Kenny Pickett, even though he did end up having a good game for Philadelphia, Washington was in control from that point on when they knocked out Hurts. So they coming in. We're talking about the Commanders. They're coming in on an emotional high, on a confidence high. You beat a division winner in Tampa. Say what you want about them. You beat the number 1 team in the NFC. Why not us? Why not now? I'm sure that's a rallying cry for the Commanders going into Sunday's game. Wherever the temperatures or the conditions going to be on Sunday, the Commanders are not afraid of it. They practice and play in that stuff too. So their home stadium, FedEx Field, is an outdoor stadium, so they're used to the elements as well. So wherever elements and outlying factors are thrown in the Commanders' way, they're just saying, "Hey, we'll take on all comers. We play as one unit, and we'll give you our best shot." And like you said, they've been playing with house money. If they're going to do it again, they'll do at least one more time next Sunday.
All right, well, we'll talk more about that matchup coming up on Friday. But to the nightcap and probably another thriller here on the AFC. You got the Bills holding off the Ravens 27-25. Josh Allen, not his best game, 127 yards. James Cook, 67 rushing yards. Lamar Jackson, 254 yards, 2 TDs, but he had a couple of costly turnovers. Derrick Henry only got the ball 16 times for 84 yards. I got a point contention about that in a second. Isaiah Likely has 73 receiving yards, leading the way for everybody there. Now, it was really the defense. Matt Milano made a quick a quick play that kept the Ravens from at least making it into a two-score game. And then of course Mark Andrews. Look, I know he's gonna get a lot of flack, and he should. I mean, like he tried to do the corner, and then gave up the turnover, and then there was the surefire 2-point conversion that would have tied the game. He dropped that. But at the same time, though, I will say, I know no one wants to blame him, but Lamar Jackson, that fumble was costly. that early interception that he had left points on the board, and the Bills actually turned around and scored a TD off that turnover. So I know people don't want to blame Lamar Jackson. Look, does he deserve all the blame? No, but at the same time, though, he picked the worst time to have one of his worst games of the season because he had not had those that had like I think he may have had like maybe two turnovers in the last like 6 games. So unfortunately, you play your worst game at the worst time.
And this is what happens where you consider one of the best players in the league. You're going to take the criticism. When you lose, you get all the praise when you win. When you are winning. Now, let's break down the 2 turnovers from yesterday. Now, the interception he threw, was it a bad play? Yes, but it did not cost him because Buffalo Bills were 3 and out following that interception. Now, the fumble you talked about, I thought he was trying to do too much. Yes, you could blame the elements a little bit, but both those teams playing those elements, so they should have been more prepared. That was Lamar Jackson's fault. Buffalo, I believe, scored a touchdown on that next drive.
Yep.
And so, but even though Baltimore was still in, you could tell that the wheels were starting to fall off a little bit. The Save Flowers injury really came to bite him in the bug. You mentioned Isaiah Likely's performance yesterday. He was the only reliable target in the passing game. I know Rashad Bateman had scored the touchdown on the opening drive for Baltimore, but excuse me, Likely was the only secured target for Lamar Jackson. Although you mentioned Mark Andrews, he's part of the blame too. He had 2 drops, including that 2-point conversion that would have tied the game to go to overtime. He had a bad game as well. But on the flip side for Buffalo, they weren't as sharp, Chris, as you would like to on offense. Yes, James Cook didn't have his greatest performance, but he was effective running the ball. Josh Allen, you didn't have to put too much pressure. Baltimore didn't put too much pressure on him except for a 4th down play where they stopped him, I believe, on the goal line there late in the stages of the game. He didn't have the world's greatest performance either, but the Buffalo Bills were effective enough to win the game. You really had to give credit to the defense. And Von Miller, we talked about the Lamar Jackson fumble. Von Miller could have scored a touchdown, but he played alert. He picked up the ball and ran down the sideline. So that Buffalo Bills defense was very active yesterday. And you mentioned about Derrick Henry. I'll let you rant on that in a minute, but I thought they really kept Derrick Henry in check, especially in that second half.
Yeah, they did. But he only had 16 carries, and especially when you didn't have Flowers out there, you could have used him a little bit more. I mean, he had a couple of great cuts, a 17-yarder that led to the touchdown in their not opening drive, but I think one of their drives after that. And look, I mean, there's plenty of blame to go around for Baltimore, so you gotta have to I'm not gonna trust. I know that Tom Monken is being considered for the Bears coaching. Well, that's what they're saying, but I'm like, I can't trust anybody that doesn't give the ball to Derrick Henry, only 16 times. Well, people say, well, that was their efforts. I'm like, so you didn't have Flowers out there. And unfortunately, Mark Andrews didn't have his best game. So you use the ball to kind of run it and perhaps maybe a couple of little undercuts and such. So that probably would have advanced some of those drives in that way. I mean, the elements. No, I'm not even gonna say that because it's not like Baltimore. Like I said, it's not like Baltimore played like in the Caribbean, half the time in tropical weather. So it's not like to say that, oh well, no, because that's stupid, and that's not the first time he's played in those elements. So. And look, I love Lamar and such. But like I said, this is a team loss for the Ravens, and I'm not gonna blame it all on Andrews or Lamar. No, I'm not. Look, everybody contributed, and the play calling just wasn't very good.
All right, your studs and duds from the NFL divisional playoff run. Those 3 studs, go.
All right, well, of course, Washington is one of my studs. I think nobody had them going to the NFC title game, especially not this early. And give Dan Quinn that whole coaching staff, and like I said, Adam Peters, the GM, for building this team. And these are, I don't want to say a bunch of cast-offs and misfits, but sort of like a lot of, I'll say more young players and misfits and cast-offs. But yeah, I mean, just a great total team win. Not just Jaden Daniels, not just Terry McLaurin, but their defense was really good. Forcing 5 turnovers. Saquon Barkley, of course, 205 rushing yards and 2 TDs. I mean, that's probably why you saved him to do all this stuff in the playoffs. So we'll just see how they do this again as they face the Commanders again. And my I'll say Buffalo. I mean, look, they didn't play their best game, and look, Josh Allen didn't play his best game. They really didn't have to do too much, but they did just enough. Look, Matt Milano, people forget that he was not there in the AFC title game last year against the Chiefs. He wasn't there. So I think he could play a big difference. He'll come on Sunday, but we'll talk about that on Friday.
All right, my 3 studs are as follows. The Washington Commanders rushing attack with Jeremy Nichols, Austin Eckler, and Brian Robinson Jr. All three of those running backs were effective for Washington as they upset the Lions 45-31 to move on to the NFC Championship game for the first time since the 1991 season, where that team known as the Redskins at the time won the Super Bowl for Buffalo. My second stud will go to Travis Kelce, the tight end from Kansas City. 7 catches, 117 yards in the score as the Chiefs will move on to the AFC title game, defeating the Houston Texans 23-14. And my third stud will be Saquon Barkley for Philadelphia. 26 carries, 205 yards, and 2 touchdowns as the Eagles hold off the Los Angeles Rams 28-22 as they return to the NFC Championship game for the first time since, I believe, the 2017 season when they won it all.
Yep. You are right. And okay, my 3 does on the flip side. The referees and then Houston, Kansas City game. I mean, really, you're gonna call that game on Will Anderson? Really, I don't blame him for being pissed off afterwards. Not to say that Houston would have won had that not happened, but even still, I think that would have, he could have guarded Travis Kelce a little bit more. Those catches like he was wide open. Hello, but whatever. Let's see. My other duds, like I said, Baltimore. Again, everyone deserves blame for that loss. Not just Andrews, not just Lamar, but everybody. I'm talking about the coordinators too. But again, shout out to Buffalo for not having to do too much, but they still won anyway. And Detroit. Look, I'm not gonna totally blame us here on remember that play that it was, I think it was like it was still a couple of minutes left, and Tom Brady, shout out to him because I think he called his best game of the season by far. And that whole thing with the 12 men on the field, it was 4th and 2. They were like in the 6 to 7 yard line. The Commanders were, and the fact that there were too many men on the field, Brady kept saying, "Hey, call timeout." 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and he counted those 12 guys. And I don't know who missed that. I don't know if it was Glenn or whoever it was. I know that one of their quarterback on that defense, they lost him a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, those are the kind of things that ended that game. That was game right there. And Ben Johnson. That little thing with Jameson Williams, that little flip, really? Why would you do that when you're down 9? I can see if you were up 9, you would do that, but you were down 9 and you did that? Oh,
no, that turned out to be an interception. Yes, I saw that too. Like, really? And not the best time to call that.
And somebody who would do that? Matt Nagy. Just saying.
You may see that reincarnated come next fall, but we'll talk about that with our guest Cheryl Raye Stout coming up at the top of the hour.
I said what I said.
My 3 duds are as follows. I agree with you with the referee in the Kansas City-Houston game. My second dud will feature the Detroit Lions and Jared Goff. I know he had over 313 yards passing and a touchdown, but he also had 3 interceptions. Not his best showing. And my third dud I will agree with you, Lakina. The Baltimore Ravens. It's a team loss, and you cannot just blame that one person. I know Mark Andrews he's going to think about those 2 drops this offseason, probably starting today. But it was an all-around team loss, and Baltimore just picked the wrong time to have a bad game.
Jackie Smith, of course, echoing that. For those of you who wondered, that little reference of him being the sickest man in America. I'm talking about Andrews. Super Bowl 13 between the Cowboys and the Steelers.
Yes.
That touchdown that Jackie Smith, he still, I'm sure he still lives that down. I know he's in his 80s, but I'm sure he still lives that down to this day. But Vern Lundquist, who was doing radio for the Cowboys at the time.
That's right.
Yep. A lot of people don't know that, but yeah. You gotta be the sickest man in America. That's how that whole thing started. For those of you who were scoring at home, wondering what they were referencing, people were referencing to during all that. But yeah,
you're listening to Second City Sports on Sports Zone Chicago, the special MLK edition. I'm Sid. That's Lakina. Before we close out hour number 1, we will preview tonight's college football playoff, the national championship game taking place in the Mercedes-Benz Dome down there in Hotlanta, in Atlanta, Georgia, between the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The Irish check in at 14-1. The Ohio State Buckeyes at 13-2. The Ohio State Buckeyes are currently favored by 8.5 points. Lakina, what do you see in this matchup for tonight's game, and who has the edge Will Notre Dame's defense shine one more time, or will Howard have a surprise performance for us tonight at QB for the Buckeyes?
Well, the weather won't be an issue because they're in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, so they're indoors, so there won't be a problem. Now, I will say it's going to be whoever sets the tone early. We've been saying it for the last couple, the fourth of the quarters and the semis. I mean, look, if you're Notre Dame, you want to try to slow down, try to force Will Howard into passing. And if you're Ohio State, you want to let Trevion Henderson cook and give them a shot to kind of set the tone early and keep Riley Leonard and Jeremiah Love and that offense off the field for Notre Dame. If you're Notre Dame, look, you were a little short-handed on defense. You're gonna have to slow Henderson, the rest of that running backs down. Now Jeremiah Smith could be a big factor. You didn't hear too much in that semifinal game. So I think if you're Ohio State, you want to try to kind of get him going. So it really is it's really gonna depend on who sets the pace early, what team can set the tone early. And I think that's gonna be the key. Whoever wins this game tonight.
I'm agreeing with you. Whoever I'm focusing on the running game for both of these teams. Trevion Henderson and Judkins, the running back tandem for Ohio State. I think both of them have over 900 yards rushing individually so far this year. On the flip side, you mentioned Jeremiah Love for Notre Dame, but I'm focusing on that front four for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Can they keep Riley Leonard in the pocket, and can they make him force some throws like you mentioned about Will Howard on the flip side? For that Fighting Irish defense, can you force Riley Leonard into a couple of mistakes, no matter what Jeremiah Love does as far as running the ball for the Fighting Irish? I'm looking at the front four for both of these teams. I think it's going to come down to the running game for both these teams. It's going to come down to who could put the pressure the most on these quarterbacks. And what do the Fighting Irish defense coordinator, will he have? What kind of blitz packages will he have against Will Howard? And Miles and Riley Leonard, I know he has been dependent on that much all year for the Fighting Irish. But if you're Ohio State, you better force him to use his feet and his legs tonight to force him to a couple of mistakes, get him back penalty. Because if you can, Ohio State will win this game. Ohio State have the talent offensively over Notre Dame. Yes, they do. But as we said all year long, the Fighting Irish defense in their running game has been responsible for the majority of their victories. I think it's going to be a chess match tonight. Whoever has the better running game, whoever has the most takeaways is going to win this game tonight.
Could be whoever forces those turnovers. Jack Sawyer for Ohio State. I think he's gonna try really hard to try to have Riley Leonard kind of get off his comfort zone a little bit, but he can run. So like I said, it's gonna be interesting to see which team kind of like I said set the tone early and just get it going there, and who can. Well, I don't like I said. I don't think Ohio State blows them out. I just don't see it happening. I know 9.5, 8.5. I think I saw. That's a little bit high. I think for me. So I think Notre Dame covers, but I think Ohio State will win another national championship.
All right, we'll see what happens tonight. That's at 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on ESPN, the 2024-2025. We'll see what they put on those jerseys tonight because the NCAA want to confuse everybody. So the 2024 season, the inaugural college football playoff national championship game between Ohio State and Notre Dame. That's tonight at 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on ESPN. All right, Lakina, we got a couple of minutes before we close out hour number one and bring on our guest, Miss Cheryl Raye Stout from WBEZ 91.5 FM in Chicago to kick off now hour number two. Now, the breaking news, a couple of breaking news items regarding the head coaching job, which affects the Chicago Bears. One, they interviewed Eddie George, the former Tennessee Titan, who's now head coach at Tennessee State. They interviewed him yesterday. Talking about the Bears, they interviewed him yesterday. Jay Glazer, Fox Sports, broke the news later on Saturday night following the Washington-Detroit game. And, of course, Aaron Glenn, who the Bears will talk to later this week from Detroit, he's going to have his second round of interviews with the New York Jets scheduled to be interviewed by them later on this week.
Yeah, I saw Eddie George news, and I'm just like, huh, really? No shade to Eddie George. He's done a great job with that Tennessee State program, the Tennessee State Tigers down there. It was the HBCU school. They won that conference again. And I'm just like, are they just? They actually interviewed him in person, so I'm assuming that's to fulfill the Rooney Rule. We'll ask Cheryl about that.
That was my initial thought too.
Yeah, so we'll ask her about that. I'm sure she probably knows that, but it just seems like there's a lot of things here at play. And I saw Jonathan Jones, and I know he just posted something that there's a lot of talk about Ben Johnson to Chicago. What that is, who the hell knows? But look, I mean, it's just like, for me, it just kind of feels like a lot will probably still happen. Now, again, do I think the Bears may have their coach in place by the end of the week? Maybe. But again, I mean, there are a lot of things at play here. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of happens with all this stuff. I mean, do they do their second round of interviews? They've already talked to like 17, guys already. So, do they, talk to Chuck? Did they wait a little bit and probably talk to a couple of other guys, this week, a certain OC down in over at DC. But again, I don't know. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting though.
Yeah, I know they're supposed to talk to Tom Monken, the OC from the Baltimore Ravens, and of course, I know they'll probably meet up with Ben Johnson again and Eric Glenn both in person coming up later this week. So, like you said, we'll ask our guest, Ms. Cheryl Raye Stout, about all those potential interviews and hirings and firings from the beloved Bear coming up in our second hour of the show. All right, Lakina, that closes out hour number one. Hour number two straight ahead as you're listening to a special edition of Second City Sports. We're live and living on this MLK Day right here on Sports on Chicago. We kick off hour number two talking Bears, Chicago sports, and more with Miss Cheryl Raye Stout from WBEZ FM in Chicago. You're listening to Sports Zone Chicago.
This year, my mom got me the perfect bag for back to school.
These colorful binders help me stay organized.
These headphones are just what I need for studying.
These new sneakers are just what I need for the new year.
This jacket is a real must-have.
My parents got me the skateboard I wanted. It's pretty cool.
These scissors really come in handy in art class.
These colored pencils, too. These new socks, they can be a real lifesaver. I finally got my own phone to stay in touch with my mom.
Trisha's having a sleepover tonight. Can I go?
I wonder about Lucy's friends. What should I say? I know you're only 10, but one of these days a friend will offer you a drink. And alcohol at your age can lead to so many things. None of them good.
So can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me
I
something.
finished my homework.
Bigger promise. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you. Your real friends won't care. Deal?
Sure.
Really?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Hey, this is Dr. J, and I listen to Sean and Maya in the morning.
Welcome back to the special edition of Second City Sports as we broadcast on the special Martin Luther King Jr. holiday edition. We're locked and loaded and live in the living color right here on Sports Zone Chicago. I'm City Brown, which is me. Lakina McGee over there is she. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You follow my Kina McGee on the Twitter, X, and IG.
As we kick off hour number 2 of the special program, talking Chicago Bears, Chicago sports, and a whole lot more with our special guests. If you have any questions and comments for our guests, you can hit us up at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or at Sports Zone Chicago YouTube. Type in those questions and comments in the comment section. Lakina will get them up on the screen for you.
Let's not waste any more time. That she's one of our favorites from WBEZ, and contrary to popular belief, she has not interviewed for the Bears head coaching job. Although I'm sure she could if she wanted to. She is the one, the only, the legendary Miss Cheryl Raye Stout.
Hey!
How are you?
Nice to see. Okay, how about you guys?
You're doing great.
How did your interviews go?
Good. And we're trying to stay warm here, Cheryl. So let's start with the Bears and talking about those interviews because there might be a lot of moving parts. They've already talked to 17 guys. Well, unfortunately, Cheryl's not one of them, but where do you see this going as far as the coaching search is concerned?
Well, when I was at my deli taking a number, I thought that was for a Bears coaching job. But I think with what happened this weekend, with Detroit losing, and the fact is Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn are now able to look at other jobs and take their in-house interviews, I think that's going to speed up the process. I think we'll know where the Bears may be heading. The fact is Ben Johnson's coveted by several teams that are looking for a head coach. And so this could be the time where sometime this week we may have more of an idea of what they're thinking and where they may be going. And I think Ben Johnson's very high on their list. But if he goes to the Raiders, like a lot of people think, then we'll know a little bit more about where they're going to be headed probably in the next few days.
And speaking of the other head coaching candidates that the Bears interviewed over the last couple of weeks via Zoom, I know they interviewed Eddie George yesterday, the former Tennessee Titans down there at Tennessee State, has done a tremendous job at HBCU. But with the likes of Pete Carroll and Ron Rivera, talk to us about some of those other candidates that they interview. Now, me personally, Lakina knows is I made the case on this show a couple of weeks ago that Pete Carroll should be considered for this job. I know people want to say because of his age that it'll probably be the reason why he won't get this job, but I look at it like this. Even though Caleb Williams is on his rookie contract, but the Bears are under pressure to win now, especially given the job that Ryan Poles is out there. It sounds like to me that from what I've read and heard that he only has 1 year left on his contract. And plus, the Bears are still trying to get a new stadium. I'm sure we'll bring that up again at some point. But I brought up the fact that if you want to keep Caleb Williams happy, because this is what it's all about now, and you still have a young roster, which is not that far away being a playoff team, Pete Carroll should be at least be considered for the job. What do you think about the other candidates that the Bears have interviewed? Do they even have a shot at getting this job?
I want to take one point up about Pete Carroll. The thing about Pete Carroll, though, he likes to have power. He had power in Seattle. So he may be somebody that Ryan Poles may not want to have around him because, he'll push the envelope with him. But I do think the one candidate as a former coach would be Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy has developed quarterbacks in his, he hasn't had the greatest resume when you think about it, but he did win a Super Bowl. He did have to deal with Aaron Rodgers. Anybody who's had to deal with Aaron Rodgers needs to have a pat on their back. And also Dak Prescott. So he does know how to be able to, and he's going to the postseason. Doesn't win much in the postseason. He did win, again, he won a Super Bowl. But the thing is, he's got the resume that probably would fit better. And I think he would make Caleb Williams a happy camper. Another candidate that's good, you can't talk to yet is Cliff Kingsbury. Cliff Kingsbury, who's with Washington. We've seen what he's done with Jaden Daniels. He's done a great job with him. And don't forget, when he left his job at Arizona, when he got fired from Arizona, where did he go? He went to USC, and he was an advisor and when Caleb Williams was at USC. And so there is a relationship there. And I think you have to I really believe that they're going to lean towards somebody that, yes, as you're right, they have to develop Caleb Williams. They have to get him to the next stage. And we've seen that with Kingsbury. with what he's done. And also another candidate would be Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, what he's done with Josh Allen, and how he's been able to get that a balanced attack with running and passing. So those are candidates I think they're very, very strongly got to be considered at this point. And again, Kingsbury can't be talked to until Washington's out of the playoffs. Same thing with Brady.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see will the Bears be willing to wait for those two guys. Well, they've already talked to Brady already, but the Kingsbury part, that's gonna be the number one thing here. Now, who do you think will have the final say? Will it be Poles? Will it be Warren? Will it be the McCaskies? Who do you think will have like the final say of who gets the job?
It's the $1 million question. I was at the press conferences where all those parties talked. And the interesting thing is that it was alluded that it would be Ryan Poles' decision. But if he only got 1 year in his contract, that makes me question if that's actually accurate. Because the one thing this team has missed is you got to have your GM, your head coach, and your quarterback all in sync. And that hasn't happened yet with this team. They need to have those three aspects in sync in order to succeed. And if they don't have that done, it's going to be interesting. But I'm kind of curious if somehow underneath the radar, we'll find out that Ryan Poles is going to get a contract extension. I'm not sure, but that could be something so that, because if a head coach comes in here and he knows that Ryan Poles only has 1 year, who is his allegiance to? Is it to Ryan Poles or Kevin Warren? And so then you have that power struggle going on there, and that's a possibility that the franchise cannot afford at this point.
Sid?
Yeah, and before we move on, Cheryl, speaking of Ryan Poles, with that 1 year remaining left on the contract, where it's been reported, why has he been keeping it a secret from the media and from the fans? Because like you said, any potential head coaching candidate, they want to know how long that he has left on his contract, how long that he's going to be here. If the Bears turn around and make the playoffs next year, you're going to have to work with him a little bit longer, whether you want to or not.
Right, and that's why everyone knows that is not a good secret to keep. I'm sure the first question that these candidates are asking is, how long are you going to be the general manager? How long is your contract? Because they don't want to end up being fodder because of them making a wrong decision. And the other thing is, if you do have this situation and you have a head coach that not comfortable with Ryan Poles, he's gonna leapfrog and go to Kevin Warren, and that's not a good situation to have at all. I don't think that Kevin Warren should really be involved with any decision making, but that's the way it goes with this team.
Oh boy. Okay. We're talking to our buddy, sports reporter from WBEZ's Cheryl Raye Stout here on Second City Sports on Chicago. Lakita McGee, Cindy Brown with you.
Let's all have a drink.
Yeah, exactly. Oh gosh, yes. But
yeah.
well, look, keeping up with the drinking theme, let's talk a little bit of Bulls. We'll get that out the way. They've lost 5 in a row. They lose their opener on the road in the West Coast road trip to Portland last night. Now, I guess they're making P. Will available. Oh, good luck with that training him. What do you think the next steps of Will is going to be to do? Will they be very active, coming to the trade deadline? Will they stand pat? What do you think they're going to do?
Well, I think they almost have to be active. Unfortunately, AK does not make himself available to the media at all. We will not hear anything until the trading deadline happens if they make any deals. They always leave Billy Donovan. Unfortunately, he has to deal with all the questions and he has to come up with the answers. Shouldn't be him. This is a very flawed roster. They would like to trade Zach LaVine. The thought process is they're on a rebuild or headed in that direction. They would like to trade Zach LaVine, and they would like to trade Vukovic because both of them do have value. And Vukovic can get you, because Vukovic could be an all-star. He's played that well. The problem is that it's like all these parts that don't fit together. Sometimes Kobe White is going to be brilliant from the outside, and then nights like yesterday, he was not good. Their defense, they turned the ball over way too much. If you look at all these losses, these 5 losses, they average almost 20 plus turnovers per game. You could never win like that. And the fact is, they don't shoot well from the outside consistently enough. Like, and that's what they're trying to do. You just go, you just like brick, 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 and then they don't get the rebound when it does, when it doesn't fall in. So this is a team that is so seriously flawed when it comes to that. Now, they have some of these parts like Levine and Vukovic, and sometimes Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu, depends on how they're doing it. And I know some of them have been dealing with some injuries. But the thing is, it's very blah to watch this team. I'm at these games going, oh my gosh, this is really not good basketball at this point.
Sid?
Yeah, give us your thoughts on Lonzo Ball. Of course, he hasn't played basketball in nearly 3 years. I know the Bulls have brought him on slowly this year. I know he got his first start, I believe, last week, and he's been making a very big difference with this Bulls team. Could he be another trade piece come February 6th?
You know what? I have to tip my cap to him, because what he has done, no one has ever come back in any sport from that type of surgery and that type of, change to his knee. It's never happened before, and so you have to tip your cap to him. And I do agree the way the Bulls have handled him, because he is somebody that cannot play back-to-back games. They've limited his minutes, but when he is in the game, his minutes are really strong. He really can run if harken back to 3+ years ago when they did have the team that they had. And the fact is, the way they did run, they were the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference. People don't remember that. It's because the way he stretched the court. He does things. He just has a great acumen for when it comes to basketball. He is really above the line. The thing is, he may be able to get them some. I think they could maybe get a 2nd-round draft pick. I'm not sure. There would be a package deal with him with other players, but he is somebody, when you go in that locker room, those players love it. When he started that game, they were so happy for him. When he came back, that locker room was energized because of him. And that's really, you can't put stats to that, because sometimes that's an infusion of caring about a player can matter more than the stats that you see.
Yeah, he really, you can tell that he brings definitely different energy whenever he's out there on the floor. Let's talk about another disappointing winter pro team, the Blackhawks. They did get a win against the Knights over the weekend, so I guess that's a problem. But what do you think? I mean, it's kind of disappointing because they made all these moves during the off season. They still are, hasn't paid dividends. They fired Luke Richardson. So what do you think are the next steps for the Hawks here at this point?
It's kind of interesting. That game that you mentioned, that was their best first quarter they had all season. Yeah. They were attacking. They were really playing well, but the thing is, the parts, again, they're not fitting together. They signed these free agent veterans thinking that they're going to do well. I think Teuvo Teravainen has done well but those lines keep changing. And you keep changing lines. Bedard, he's not having the greatest season, but he's having a decent season. You get Tyler Bertuzzi he's actually, having a good run right now. Their goaltending can sometimes be really good, but if their defense falters, and that's what's really, a problem for them, then, your goaltender is standing on his head, having to deal with, 38 shots, 40 shots at them, and they're going to give up goals. And, it's a problem this team has got to face. I don't know, they're going to have a new coach, obviously, but they have to really look at Kyle Davidson has got to really look at, okay, where do we want to go at this point? You're in this second plus year of a rebuild, and you're not seeing any true progress. There's some glimpses. I think Frank Nagzer and Bedard and Doc, those are players that are really, you can see that they're really positive players for them. But Seth Jones finally had a good game the other day. He had the last two games, but he was supposed to be a presence, on defense, and he's had some really bad turnovers at times. So it's I'm telling you, like, it's just tough. The funniest thing is when I was up at Bears, the night before that they fired Luke Richardson, I was at that game against Boston. And I came home because something I heard from a player, Tebow Terabyne said that his confidence was shaken. It is very rare that a player would ever say that out loud. I went home and I'm doing my work and I go to my husband. I'm going, this coach is gone. He's gone. He's going to be gone because you can't have a player saying he's losing confidence. And I'm at the Bears that next day, and I'm dealing with an interim head coach that was just gotten 6 days ago, in my car finding out about Luke Richardson being fired. And I'm going, I wasn't surprised. I didn't think it was going to happen, like I thought it was going to happen. But the problem is you cannot have this kind of chaos with young players. They got to have their roles. You've got to set things up right for them. And that's something that it's on Kyle Davidson's head. He's got to take care of this.
Sid?
You listen to Cheryl Raye Stout from WBEZ 91.5 FM in Chicago. She's hanging out here with us on Second City Sports on Sports Zone Chicago. Celia Keenan here with you, talking Chicago sports and more. Let's go over to my favorite baseball team, Cheryl, those Chicago White Sox. They'll have their Sox Fest Live Fan Fest coming up this coming weekend on the South Side. We lost Jeff Torborg yesterday. He was the manager of the White Sox from 1987 through 1990. Of course, putting that team on his back. Of course, it set up the 1993, the last of the AL West Division Championship team. Me personally, I wish he was the manager. Shout out Gene Lamont, but Jeff Torborg wasn't the manager. He was long gone by then. But what is your thoughts about Jeff Torborg and his time with the White Sox? And do you have any funny stories or interesting stories you'd like to share with us about your interactions with Mr. Torborg?
Jeff, to me, was one of the most gracious, decent people to ever be a manager. I really enjoyed his company. His first year, they had an awful first year, and it was 1989 was his first year. The Cubs were going to the postseason that year.
89, okay.
And Jeff Torborg, that was his first year, and I was still covering the team while the Cubs were still winning. I was covering both teams, and there was one time he was, after a loss to Cleveland, he's sitting in his by his desk with his cap pulled over, his jacket pulled up, and he was just dismayed, how bad the team was playing. But and it was interesting because he really cared. He was the first manager that really encouraged the players to bring their children into the locker room, and he really encouraged them. And who was on his team that year? Sammy Sosa.
Yep.
People don't remember that Sammy Sosa was part of
with that bad Jerry curl.
Oh,
right.
God, yeah.
But the thing is, the thing about Jeff is that he cared a lot about his players. He really, really did. And he got the best out of them that next year when they had 96 wins. I'm sorry, 94 wins and 68 losses. And that was he had a 25-game jump that he was able to get. And it was also the end of Comiskey Park. It was really a lot of things. But what happened his last year there, because then Larry Himes, who hired Jeff Torborg, who also got the players like Frank Thomas and Jack McDowell and, and all these other players that eventually did well in 93, is that he was gone and Ron Schuler took over. And Ron Schuler didn't care for Jeff for some reason. And so at the end of his last year, I'll never forget, the talk is that the Mets wanted to hire Jeff. And Carlton Fisk came up to me, pulled me aside. He goes, "Is this true that they're trying to push, Jeff out and want him to take that Mets job?" I'm going, my sources were telling, yeah, it was. He was so upset because Carlton really respected Jeff Torborg. And then what happened is Jeff leaves, he goes to the Mets. That tells you, upheaval, of somebody who was really decent. Ozzie Guillen was very, very warm about talking about him on social media because he knew that he learned a lot from him. You're talking about a man that was a catcher for the Dodgers, and he caught the perfect game of Sandy Koufax against the Cubs. He caught Nolan Ryan when he was with the Angels. So he had a resume. And and I always found that catchers make the best managers, and he was one of them.
He also had a great career as a broadcaster too. I remember, when Fox first got the baseball, he contributed there. So, just a great guy all around. He'll definitely be missed. Now, the Cubs convention was just this past weekend, Cheryl, and of course, the aforementioned Sammy Sosa made his return. Kyle Tucker, they finally figured out, money, to avoid arbitration. Thank goodness. Now, Jed Hoyer, this is kind of a lame duck season for him, and of course, Alex Bregman is still out there. A few other guys are still out there. So, do you see the Cubs making any more big moves or something, to kind of fill some of the holes they still have to fill?
Didn't sound like it from talking to Jed Hoyer. They have the money to spend. They're just not going to spend it. And the fact is, they need to do something to add to their bullpen. They do need to have some players on their bench. They do need to, they need another starter too, because you don't know if some of the players that they had that were injured last year will be able to come back and be as strong as they expect them to be. And the whole thing with Sam, it was interesting, the timing, because I don't think they were selling the tickets as much for the Cub convention until they decided to bring Sammy Sosa back. I said, then all of a sudden you're seeing that, people cared about the convention, because I know that for a fact, because somebody I knew from the ticket office was telling me that they were not selling the tickets like they, and then once they got Sammy back on board, then people were like, happy to purchase those tickets, and that place was filled. It was very filled. But as far as this year's team, they have to get a closer. You cannot go into the season without having, a solid closer, and they've lost out, on Tanner Scott and other players that they should have been able to get. And who's beating everybody? The Dodgers. The Dodgers are, they're in the stratosphere, and everybody else is so far distant from them. They're it's kind of, it was almost like, when you had Steinbrenner with the Yankees, that was before you had all the salary, kind of clamping down. But, look, the Cubs they've got to make some changes, but they're not going to do it. And it is Jed Hoyer's last year. So they better make the playoffs, because otherwise he's going to be gone.
Yeah, what do you think about the move for Kyle Tucker in that trade in this offseason? I think he improves that lineup. I think he improves that outfield defensively. I know you got Seiya Suzuki there, and Cody Bellinger did what he could. He was just on the injured list a little bit too much. I'll talk about that move with Kyle Tucker. I think he improves that lineup that much more than Cody Bellinger, in my opinion.
He's a balanced hitter. He also plays the field very well. Suzuki will not be playing the outfield. He's going to be the designated hitter. He's already been told that he's going to be the designated hitter. He will not be in the outfield. Remember, last year he had balls drop in front of him. He was, not good. Kyle Tucker is going to be a very solid bat. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the reasons. And he's a Gold Glover. There's a lot of accolades you could say about him as a player, and they needed somebody like him. Also, he comes from a winning organization, and I think that's good to help with them too. The interesting person is to see what Pete Crow Armstrong can do in center field. He can play center field. Will Craig Counsell feel comfortable putting him in the leadoff spot? Because if he could get on base and make things happen, it also makes your lineup, down the line, have better results if you have somebody at least getting on base like he can, and he can also steal bases too.
Now let's go back to the White Sox for a second. And on the field for the White Sox, of course, Will Venable takes over as manager. Do you think the White Sox will make a little bit of improvement? Perhaps win 60 games, I guess. So will they be as bad this coming season as they were last year? I guess that's what my question is to you.
I don't think they will be, because towards the end of the season, things were starting to click for them a little bit, and people wouldn't realize that, because when you look at the total of the losses. The tough part is not having Garrett Crochet in that locker room. Besides him on the hill, where he was really brilliant, he was an anchor for those young pitchers. So hopefully that doesn't hurt them so much, because Jonathan Cannon and some of those guys really need to have that consistency. They've made so many trades. I mean, it's like, my mind's blown how many, players you have to look at, and all these prospects that they acquired. They've got like 3 or 4 catchers that they could use, and they got to decide like who's going to be the catcher to catch all these young players. But I think Will Venable is the right person for the job at this time. As far as wins and losses, they could still lose 100 games, but I think we're going to see some strides. I think we're going to see them get, and I like the fact that they kept Grady Sizemore, because Grady Sizemore has a real good rapport with some of these players. Another former player like Will, where they could talk and talk to them while they're on the bench before they go into a game. Give them some advice. And as long as these players take the coaching, that's really important. As long as they take the coaching, they will be better. But anything can happen. But I just think that they can't be as bad as they were last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hopefully the Sox don't lose 100 games this year. I'm just hoping and praying that that doesn't happen. So we'll see what happens with the guys on the South Side coming up this year. Last question for me, Cheryl. As we close out with her right here on Second City Sports on Sports Zone Chicago. We lost another baseball legend last week, Mr. Bob Uecker. He passed away at the age of 90. Of course, long-time MLB player, long-time MLB broadcaster. Of course, me and Lakina, we're children of the 80s. Remember him from the sitcom Mr. Belvedere on ABC. Of course, all those Miller Lite commercials from back in the day. Give us your thoughts about Mr. Uecker and what were your interactions with him like?
Bob Uecker was everything good about baseball. He was self-deprecating. He was quick-witted. He's a former player, and he really brought the essence to baseball in a form that we'll never see again, because he was funny. He was witty. He did movies. He did TV shows, and he could call a game. We talked to Len Casper the other day about it, and he said that people like him, young broadcasters, because he was on the broadcast with him a few times, they learned the game. They learned how to make the game interesting to the people that were watching the game or listening to the game. Because on radio, when you have people that can really do the essence, give you the whole information about the game with humor, but get to the point, and he did it very, very well. And he was he was one of those people when come into a stadium, it was like seeing a king walk in. He was royalty to us in broadcasting. And so he's somebody that's going to be dearly missed.
Yeah, he really will be. Okay, last question from me, Cheryl, and I've been looking at, I guess now Josina has reported that there are league sources who now believe that Ben Johnson is deeply considering the head coaching vacancy with the Bears. So nothing, although she does say nothing is official or ever done until it's done. So what do you think about that report, and what do you think is going to happen with that Bears coaching job?
She said that he's getting the job with the Bears?
No, she said that they're deeply she says that she's hearing from league sources that say that they now believe that he is deeply considering the head coaching job. No, nothing's official, nothing is done, but yeah, it just seems like it's getting a lot of clicks on here. So, what do you think about that report? I guess
until he has his in-house, interview, which is what they will do next. I don't, you have to wait and see. You could have reports, but until it's official, I don't feel comfortable with that, because I've seen this happen before, and it depends on, and it would be great for them. I think it would be a wise choice, but until it happens, we'll see.
All right, that's been Cheryl Raye Stout of WBEZ 91.5 FM in Chicago. She's the Chicago young legendary sports reporter. Check her out daily on WBEZ. Cheryl, as always, thank you very much for your time, and keep up the great work, young lady, and we'll definitely have you back on again soon.
Thank you to you both. Have a great, great new year.
You too. Stay warm. You guys stay warm, Cheryl.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, that was Miss Cheryl Raye Stout from WBEZ. Of course, we can have her on for hours, to talk, share stories and such. So I looked at that report. I was looking at it on my phone. I was looking at the report. Josina just posted a few minutes ago, I should say, and it just seems like really.
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah.
Yeah, it just seems like really. So so you're gonna report this even though nothing's official yet, and these are just league sources, and these are I don't get it, but what?
Like he said, he'll. It sounds like to me he'll eventually probably get the job, but the Bears are downing their I's and crossing their T's. And as we talked about before, we brought on Cheryl to kick off hour number two during our last segment to close out hour number one. The Eddie George interview. I'm sure the story will come out eventually, but was it that the quote unquote Rooney Rule interview for the Bears before they got Ben Johnson? Is something, and no disrespect to Eddie George in the process, but you really have to question it. And we talked about it last week when the Patriots hired Mike Vrabel, who did they talk to protect themselves from the Rooney Rule? Because for those that don't know, if you don't talk to an African American candidate in positions for these jobs, you lose draft picks. And you know, in the NFL, especially over the last several years, they have valued draft picks, not just first and second round picks. So teams don't want to lose valuable draft picks, so they had to follow the Rooney Rule.
Well, and also too, she answered my question about Cliff Kingsbury. So I think there are certain factions of that Bears organization that might, because remember he was in the build. Well, I don't know if he was in the building, but he was. They really wanted him last year for the OC job, and unfortunately, I guess allegedly, I forgot to ask Cheryl that question about allegedly Eberflus was a little insecure about the head coaching job there. So yeah, this report by Josina, look, I'm not, she's really plugged in, but it just seems like really, like, well, why would you even post that? But whatever.
Yeah, but like I said, I'm sure we'll know about it as this day goes on in the coming days and maybe even another week or two. But it seems like to me, looks like the Bears are dotting their I's and crossing their T's to make sure that Ben Johnson is the right guy. And I'm sure we'll get into it on the flip side of this break, and we'll definitely get into more on Friday. The more we know from this upcoming week, how much power does Ben Johnson really have? You know, he's the first-time head coach. What's the rapport between him and Ryan Poles? How will they work together with Ryan Poles as of right now with a year left on his contract? Just a lot of factors that we had to consider and dissect and break down.
All right, yeah, we'll keep you guys updated if anything's official yet. But yeah, the wording of the tweet just really kind of has me scratching my head a little bit there. Why would you post that? But whatever. All right, so after this break, we'll talk some Bulls as they lost 5 in a row. Oh God, and of course
only the Bulls.
Yeah, exactly. And the rest of the NBA, of course, college hoops as Illinois got a reality check against Michigan State, and the rest of the college hoops action in a double dose of a special edition of Old School TV Monday, and so much more. Lakina McGee, Studio Brown, Second City Sports on Sports of Chicago. More fun as we wrap things up coming up right after this.
This year, my mom got me the perfect bag for back to school.
These colorful binders help me stay organized.
These headphones are just what I need for studying.
These new sneakers are just what I need for the new year.
This jacket is a real must-have.
My parents got me the skateboard I wanted. It's pretty cool.
These scissors really come in handy in art class.
These colored pencils too. These new socks, they can be a real lifesaver.
I finally got my own phone to stay in touch with my mom.
Trisha's having a sleepover tonight. Can I go?
I wonder about Lucy's friends. What should I say? I know you're only 10, but one of these days a friend will offer you a drink. And alcohol at your age can lead to so many things. None of them good.
So can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me
I
something.
finished my homework.
Bigger promise. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you, your real friends won't care. Deal?
Sure.
Really?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Hey, this is Dr. J, and I listen to Sean and Maya in the morning.
Welcome back to the special live edition of Second City Sports on this MLK Day. You're locked and loaded and live in the living color right here on Sports Zone Chicago. I'm Sid, that's Lakino. You can follow yours surely on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You follow my Kingdom again on the Twitter, execute again, the IG.
This is our last break of the show for today. If you have any last minute questions or comments for us or any of the topics that we discussed on today's show thus far, as we get into the Bulls in the NBA, college basketball, in our double dose of old school TV Monday, you can hit us up at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or at Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in those questions and comments in the comment section. Lakina will get them up on the screen for you.
All right, Sid. Not a good start to the Bulls road trip as they lose to the Blazers, and this is one of those days where I'm glad I don't have the Bulls on my cable system here, and
you refuse the antenna.
Yeah, well, look, I'm feeling better knowing that I don't have to worry about that. So it's gonna be kind of interesting there. But yeah, I mean, the 102 113, 102 loss to Portland. Scoot Anderson had 25 points, which is a season high for him. That's despite Zach LaVine with 27 points. The 3-point shot is still becoming a big factor for the Bulls, unfortunately, and they did not shoot the ball well from 3 last night.
Yeah, 8 of 29 for 27% is not going to win you many games in today's NBA. As we talked about it with Cheryl Raye Stout on WBEZ in our last segment, Nikolai Vucevic, even though his numbers were down a little bit in terms of scoring last night, he still gave you a double-double, 17 points and 11 rebounds, and he is playing like an all-star. And you could use him as a trade piece for the upcoming February 6th trade deadline. Also, too, Kobe White, we talked about him in our last segment, Lakina. He continues to struggle shooting from the outside. He did last night, 4-10 overall, including 1 for 4 from downtown for 9 points. That's not going to get it done. Zach LaVine was the team leader once again last night with 27 points. 10 of 21 shooting overall, 2 of 7 from downtown. And Patrick Williams, I know his name's been mentioned on the trade about Black from over the weekend. 15 points and 3 rebounds. It has been his best performance a little bit in this recent stretch. So outside of Ayo Dosunmu's 12 points off the Bulls bench, you really didn't get much for anybody else last night. In that defense, they had a hot first quarter, but their defense, especially in the interior, which we've been talking about over the last 3-4 years, it was terrible once again last night.
Yeah, it was really, I saw the highlights of it. Just not a good showing by the Bulls here. I know Kobe White, he struggled. He only had 9 points and such. So, Yeah, I mean, 5 in a row for the Bulls. They're now 7 games under, and it doesn't get any easier because they play at one of the hottest teams in the league coming up tonight. They face the Clippers. The Clippers, they beat the Lakers yesterday, so they're gonna have a very hard time. Getting ready to play them, and that's gonna be interesting to see what they actually did beat the Clippers last time they played each other. So that should be an interesting matchup tonight.
Yeah, you mentioned. Well, let's go back to before we get into tonight's matchup with the Clippers. The Bulls on that current 5-game losing streak. They lost a heartbreaker to the Charlotte Hornets at the UC last Friday night, 125-123. But yeah, get into this matchup against the Clippers tonight. We all know what he can do. Kawhi Leonard is back. He had another good showing last night against the cross-town rival Lakers. So we talked about this on the show for the last almost 2 weeks now since his return. I'm talking about Kawhi. The Clippers are bringing him on slowly. They still have a bunch of young guys like Derrick Jones Jr., one-time former Bull from a couple years ago, and you have Norman Powell, who's been playing outstanding for this Clippers team, being their second banana this year, the former Toronto Raptor back in 2019 with a championship ring. So the Clippers have a bunch of young, talented players that finally fit into their roles. You still have veterans like Nicholas Batum, and it's going to be tough for the Bulls tonight. Both these teams are playing off of back-to-backs. The Clippers are on an emotional high from their win last night against the Lakers. First time these two teams have played in that Intruder Dome arena, so they'll be welcoming on the Bulls tonight. I will be surprised if the Bulls won this game tonight, but I think James Harden's going to show them a little something. I don't think James Harden's going to have to put up a 40-piece, but he may have to just to show the Bulls, like, you don't belong on the floor with us. So I expect the Clippers to win this game tonight. I know they're favored by 6.5, but I think the Clippers will win by double digits. I wouldn't be shocked if that happens.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, we know how much they loved playing. We know the Harden loves playing the Bulls, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he does today. Plus, this is supposed to be a game that's supposed to be played on tomorrow, but because of the fires and the schedule shuffling, that's when kind of everything else kind of went a little bit haywire there. So it should be an interesting matchup tonight. Now that Clippers Lakers game, of course, Powell had 22 in that win over the Clippers. Of course, that's despite 25 from LeBron. 5 in a row for the Clippers there. Sacramento 123, 100 over the Wizards. Domantas Sabonis had 29 points. OKC, no trouble with Brooklyn. SGA had 27 there. The Bucks beat Philly 123-109. Giannis had 34. Nikola Jokic had 20 as the Nuggets. No trouble with the Magic. And Miami beat San Antonio. Khalil Ware had 25, a season career high for him. And but a nice win for them.
I know that he's supposed to be getting Jimmy Butler back soon from that team suspension for him requesting a trade, and so we'll see what that Miami culture, that locker room looks like as it goes forward between now and January 6th. The Miami Heat are still in it as far as being in the playoffs race is concerned. So we'll see what happens with that dynamic. Jimmy Butler returning to that locker room and returning to the lineup. These are the results from Saturday's games. The Rockets beat the Trailblazers by 22, 125-103. The Cavaliers, I did watch the highlights of this one. This would turn out to be a very entertaining game. The Cavaliers beat the Minnesota Timberwolves 124-117. The Warriors get by the Wizards by 8, 122-114. The Pacers beat the 76ers by 13. The Atlanta Hawks upset the Celtics 119-115 in overtime. A little bit of a bump over the road for the Boston Celtics. Just like last year, if you're a Celtics fan, you may be a little concerned, but the sky's not falling. So I think everything is going to be okay. Just avoid any major injuries. And the Phoenix Suns got by the Pistons 125-121.
Yeah, that ended up being a good game in that Phoenix. The Detroit was actually up for most of that game, but of course, KD and a couple of bad shot decisions by the Pistons late in that game that kind of did them in there. Now the Lakers edged out the Nets 102-101. These are Friday's results. Austin Reeves had a career high 38 points there. Memphis beat San Antonio 140-112. Dallas beat OKC with a little bit of an upset. 25 points from Kyrie. SGA did struggle from the field, not his best showing. So that was one reason why the Mavs were able to pull that out. The Hornets beat the Bulls. LaMelo Ball had 26. Despite 40 points, a season high 40 for Vooch. Yeah, another bad loss there for the Bulls. Excuse me. The Pelicans beat the Jazz. The Bucks beat the Raptors. Denver Notre with the Heat, literally and figuratively. And Anthony Edwards had 36 as the T-Wolves beat the Knicks pretty easily. And the Celtics beat the Magic 124-94 as 30 points from Mr. Jason Tatum.
I'll ask you this question about the Knicks real quickly, Keena. I know they're a little banged up right now. We talked about them on our last show about Tom Thibodeau playing all 5 of his starters. I think they're in the top 8, top 10 in average most minutes played in the NBA this year. If you're a Knicks fan, are you starting to get worried about them? Because I think you even though they're still number 3, number 4 in the Eastern Conference in terms of standings, I'm starting to get worried about them. If I'm a Knicks fan.
Yeah, I'm a little bit too, and of course, like you said, I mean, they're leading the league, which is a big shocker in minutes played. Oh, that's a big shocker there. And yeah, I mean, unfortunately, yeah, this is sort of one of the things this is what you get when you get a Coach Tom Thibodeau squad. You're gonna get guys got a lot of minutes, so you've already had Jalen Brunson get a little bit banged up, Cat's banged up too. So yeah, unfortunately, this is sort of par for the course if you're a Knicks fan, Coach Thibodeau team. Sorry, kids, we tried to warn you.
All right, there's a bunch of NBA games being played today on MLK Day. We talked about the Bulls. They'll play the Los Angeles Clippers in the new Intuit Dome tonight at 9:30. You can see that game locally if you can on the new CHSN, or for those of you across the country on NBA League Pass. These are the games that are going on in progress right now on this MLK Day. The Pistons lead the Rockets 44-39 in the second quarter. The Timberwolves trail the Grizzlies by 9, 16-7. That's the first game of that TNT MLK Day doubleheader. We only have one final from earlier today. The Hornets beat the Dallas Mavericks without Luka Doncic, 110-105. Here's the rest of the schedule for this MLK Day for today. Atlanta will visit New York at 2 o'clock. The Phoenix Suns will visit the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Celtics will visit the Warriors. That's the second game that TNT MLK at 4 p.m. The Jazz will play the Pelicans. And, of course, we mentioned the Bulls and the Clippers will wrap up the holiday schedule tonight at 9:30.
Tomorrow's games, you got this is the first game of the TNT True TV streaming on Max doubleheader as the Knicks will try to bounce back as they face the Nets. Portland starts their East Coast road trip against Miami. Orlando and Toronto. The second game of that TNT True TV Max doubleheader as Philadelphia faces Denver. I'm sure they probably wish they could have flexed this game out. That game, and I should say, the Wizards and the Lakers. Right. Of course, the Wizards and the Lakers finish up that matchup for tomorrow.
Here's your schedule for Wednesday as follows. The Detroit Pistons will visit Atlanta to play the Hawks. The Suns continue their East Coast road trip. They'll go to Brooklyn to take on the Nets. The first game of the ESPN Wednesday night doubleheader will feature the Minnesota Timberwolves at the Dallas Mavericks at 6:30. Cleveland will face Houston. That should be a good one. I think ESPN should have broadcasted that one, but I digress. The Hornets will visit the Grizzlies. Milwaukee will pay a visit to New Orleans to face the Pelicans. The Jazz will pay a visit to OKC to face the Thunder. The second game of that Wednesday night ESPN doubleheader will feature the Golden State Warriors visiting the Sacramento Kings. And wrapping up the Wednesday night schedule, the Boston Celtics will start their West Coast road trip. They'll take on the Clippers.
All right. Thursday, we got an early game. You got San Antonio, Indiana, NBA TV. That's at 1 o'clock. Special note there for those of you who are going to be watching that game. Portland and Orlando at 6. You got Toronto and Atlanta at 6:30. The first game of the TNT True TV streaming on Max doubleheader as the Heat.
Yes, game is in Paris.
Yeah, those who are wondering about why that game is so early. Yeah, it's in Paris, a part of that Paris series. Of course, the Bulls played there last year against the Pistons. San Antonio and Indiana are playing that game in Paris this year. It was a big crowd there last year. It should be a big crowd this year. Of course, Wemby makes his return back to Paris, so you got to think that the crowd's going to be jumping there in that arena. Miami and Milwaukee, of course, that's going to be the TNT True TV doubleheader. Dallas no KC. Kind of wish that this game was on TNT and True TV, but even without Luca, but whatever. Sacramento and Denver, another game that you probably could say could have been the part that whatever. The Bulls, they face Golden State, their yearly trip to the Bay Area, and I'm sure the Golden State's gonna want their revenge, but Steph and them, but we'll see what happens there. That matchup at 9. Boston and the Lakers, not from back in the day, unfortunately. That's the second game that TNT True TV doubleheader at 9 o'clock, and of course, capping off the night will be the Wizards and the Clippers. Oh, back in the day, those Celtics Lakers matchups, good times.
You tell me.
Hey, I'm just saying.
That Lambert ain't walking through that door.
Right. Just saying.
Yeah, pardon my Rick Pitino.
Exactly. That's your schedule for this week in the NBA.
All right, you listen to Second City Sports on Sports Zone Chicago. Sia Lakina hanging out here with you on this special MLK edition of the program. Let's transition over to college basketball. Lakina will start out locally. The final line night, they lose a tough one to the Tom Izzo crew in the Michigan State Spartans, 80-78. The Northwestern Wildcats, they played a great game against the University of Michigan, but they failed to score a bucket within the last 7 minutes of regulation. They have won now 6 of their last 8 games. Now, on the flip side for Northwestern, they're now 2-5 in Big Ten play, 11-7 overall.
Yeah, that was a tough loss for Northwestern, especially going, like you said, they went over in those last few minutes of going in overtime. You can't do that. I know one of their guys, got ejected, so that was a terrible call there. But even still, they were already struggling even before that. So yeah, tough loss for Northwestern. Now hopefully they can get back on track. Shout out to our buddy Spiro Dews who had the call of that Michigan State Illinois game for CBS. Troy Holloman had 17 points. Will Riley in the lose never for the Illini had 19. Yakutonis fortunately was in foul trouble for a lot of that game, so he really couldn't get into a rhythm there. And look, I know that Coach Izzo was trying to be killing with kindness, calling in the Celtics and talking about Illinois, but unfortunately they got the best of Illinois there, and Sparty is now undefeated in conference play. Memphis gets back on track after losing to Temple. They beat Charlotte. TCU with a small upset over Baylor. Maryland beat Nebraska. Speaking of Temple, no letdown for them. They beat Tulane yesterday. And UMass beat LaSalle. Now going back into Saturday's games, there are a couple of good ones here. Auburn, they held off Georgia. That was a great finish. West Virginia upset Iowa State. Javon Small had 27 points there. Cooper Flag, got back on track. Of course, people who were worried about him, he had 28 points as, back home in Boston as they beat BC. No trouble with them there. And Alabama held off Kentucky. Florida beat Texas. And Vanderbilt, a nice upset win over Tennessee.
Going back to that final line night game yesterday, Lakina, Will Riley, as you mentioned, he was the man for the final line night scoring rights, but he was in foul trouble. That was one of the Illini's Achilles' heels. Now, the Illini did start out hot in their game, including a +5 advantage on offensive rebounds over Michigan State. I know these two teams are the top 2 rebounding teams in the Big Ten and overall in the NCAA, but as we talked about with the Illini over these last couple of years, when you fall in love way too much with that 3, it's going to come back to bite you, and that's exactly what happened in that second half. Now, their rebounding overall kept the Illini in as they were going cold from the outside, but aggressive when their shots are not falling. They have the defense, they have the rebounding now, but they got to tighten up on the shooting and get a little bit more tougher with their interior defense.
All right. Xavier upsets Marquette, so a real loss for Marquette at home. Houston held off UCF. I told you some of these games were very close. Texas A&M no trouble with Texas with LSU. Sorry, I lost my place for a second there. Purdue, Trey Coughlin-Wren had 23 points as Purdue beat Oregon. Creighton, they get UConn again. They upset UConn on the road, 63. Jemiah Neal had 24 points there. Mississippi State, in a great game against SA rival Mississippi, 84-81. Santa Clara gets their first win over Gonzaga. Go all the way back to Steve Nash, back 30 plus years ago. The first time since then that Santa Clara beat Gonzaga. Ooh, that's looks like Gonzaga.
Man, we getting old.
I know, right? Oh, he had like the acne on his face. I remember when Nash was playing there. Wisconsin no trouble with USC. Look, that was a compliment. I wasn't trying to be mean. Florida State beats Georgia Tech. Clemson beat Pitt in overtime. So the locals, SMU, no trouble with Miami. Texas Tech beat Arizona. Excuse me. And let's see here. Stanford edged out North Carolina. Oklahoma State beats Colorado. And let's see. This Dayton win. They got a Lozo Charles like alley oop to give that up after forced overtime. They lose to Dayton. Loyola does 83-81 in a tough loss for Coach Valentine and his crew in overtime. Illinois State did beat Missouri State, so a nice win for them as they try to keep pace in the Missouri Valley. And yeah, that's about it there.
Well, two more. Two more scores. Shout out our guy Jay Hood from ESPN 1000 Chicago, the voice of the Flames. Yep. 81-74 over Valparaiso. I believe that's the 12th win of the year. So they're trying to keep afloat in the Missouri Valley Conference. And I believe Chicago State got their first win of the season. They beat Lemoyne University 88-74.
Yeah, nice.
88-72, I should say.
Yeah, Coach Ron Upson's done a great job with UIC. They're kind of right there in the top tier in that Missouri Valley. So Missouri Valley is probably going to be a one bid lead, I should say. So you got to try to see if they can get it going there now. Some of this week's games we got coming up: Fresno State and New Mexico. Note the start time there, folks, at 4:00 on CBS Sports Network. Georgetown and Villanova renew their rivalry at 5:00 on FS1. Rutgers and Penn State, that's going to be on Peacock. In the Patriot League, you got Bucknell and Colgate at 6:00 on CBS Sports Network. And a little HBCU love, Hampton and North Carolina A&T meet at 8:00 on CBS Sports Network. All right, and tomorrow you got Vanderbilt.
All right, here's your top. Here's Tuesday. We'll have Vanderbilt traveling to Alabama to face the. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Alabama will host number four. Alabama will host Vanderbilt on Tuesday. That's at 6:00 Central Standard Time on the SEC Network. Apologize for the technical difficulties, folks. UConn, they had a bad loss over the weekend. Hopefully they'll bounce back. They'll face Butler. That's at 6 p.m. on FS1. Number 11 Purdue will host Ohio State. That's at 6:30 on Peacock. Other scheduled games for Tuesday, 8:30 on Peacock, Chicago time. We'll have number 18 Wisconsin. They'll travel out to the West Coast to face UCLA. And on Tuesday at 10:00 Central Standard Time on the Big Ten Network, Washington and Oregon will do battle. These are the Big Ten teams now, folks. So as the key to say, welcome to the new era of college sports in 2025.
Right. Shout out to DePaul. They finally broke their 38-game losing streak in the Big East. They got their first win in like almost 2 years against Georgetown. They're going to be back in action tomorrow.
You won't be pulling your hair out.
No, not this time. As they host Creighton, so a nice. We'll see if they can build off that. Minnesota and Iowa. That's going to be at BTN at 8:00. Arizona State, they face West Virginia. They're back in the top 25. The Mountaineers after their upset win over Iowa State. Louisville, they're back in the top 25. They face SMU at 8 o'clock on the ACC network. Illinois State hosts Indiana State. That's going to be on ESPN Plus. Marquette and Seton Hall. Marquette hoping to bounce back from the loss of Xavier. That's going to be at 7 o'clock on Peacock. Utah and Houston at 7 o'clock on ESPN Plus. UCF will face a Iowa State team that's not going to be in a very good mood after losing to West Virginia at 7 o'clock on ESPN Plus. And Bradley meets Belmont at 6:30 on ESPN Plus. And that's your schedule for Tuesday.
Yep. And Bradley with another big test on the road. For Wednesday, back in top 25 action, number 12, Kansas will play TCU. That's at 6 p.m. on ESPN2. Number 5, Florida, another team that's under the radar this year. They're ranked number 5 in the country. 16-2, they'll travel to face the South Carolina Gamecocks. That's at 6 p.m. on the SEC network. St. John's, and Ole Miss, number 16, will face number 13, Texas A&M. That's at 8 p.m. on Wednesday on ESPN2.
Yeah, I think this is the first time in like 4 or 5 years that St. John's is back in the top 25. I'm sure Coach Patil will love to make sure that no one's really noticing them. So I'm sure he'll be not be happy about that they're being noticed now. Southern Illinois hosts Murray State at 6 o'clock on ESPN Plus. Northwestern meets Indiana. They host them at 6 o'clock on BTN. Boise State and Colorado State at 7 o'clock on CBS Sports Network. You got Texas A&M and Ole Miss on ESPN2. That should be a good one.
All right. For Thursday, back to the top 25 action. Number 24, Memphis will host Wichita State. That's at 6 p.m. on ESPN. Then you will try to get back on track. Number 17 ranked in the country. Now they'll host Maryland from down there in Champaign. Big game for both teams. Maryland checks in at 14-5. The Illini at 13-5. So the Illini needs to get back on track. Maryland, remember, I think they beat them down there last year. So revenge is on their minds for the Fighting Illini for this year. So big game for the Fighting Illini. I think they'll win this one here.
Should be a good one down there in Champaign. Appalachian State and Arkansas. These are top 2 teams in their respective conferences at 8 o'clock on ESPN2. Morehead State and Eastern Illinois on ESPNU in the Ohio Valley. A good one here in the West Coast Conference at 8. You got San Francisco and St. Mary's on CBS Sports Network. Let's see any other games of note. And you got Washington State and Santa Clara. Santa Clara hoping to put off that upset win over Gonzaga as they host Wazoo. Argo Kelly Anderson's alma mater. 10 o'clock the nightcap on CBS Sports Network.
All right, you're listening to Second City Sports on Sports Zone Chicago. See Lakina here with you, wrapping up today's show. Around this time, Lakina, especially on today's show, we pay homage to old school memories, old school TV. So today we'll give you a special double play of old school TV Monday. One sports related, one non-sports related. We'll get the sports related version of old school TV Monday out the way now. 34 years ago today, Candlestick Park, the old school NFL on CBS, Pat Summerall, John Madden, they were calling the 1990 NFC Championship game between the San Francisco 49ers and the New York Giants. Of course, San Francisco 49ers were going for a 3-peat. The New York Giants were trying to rebound from being knocked out of the playoffs from the LA Rams the year before. This is one of the most physical games I've ever watched, Lakina. If you watch the 1990 America's game, it's on YouTube. The New York Football Giants, you can hear the emotions coming out of Jeff Hostetler's voice. He was the quarterback of the New York Giants that year because remember Phil Simms got hurt late in the season, so Hostetler had to take over. But it was a classic battle, physical back and forth game. Of course, Joe Montana got sacked. It was a fumble. I believe Leonard Marshall hit him from the backside. Of course, the Giants recovered. Matt Barr hits the game-winning field goal. The Giants beat the San Francisco 49ers 15-13. The significance of that game, the 49ers had a chance to 3-peat. They couldn't do it. They lost the game at home. It turned out to be Joe Montana's last start for the 49ers. I know you played in that one game in 1992 against Detroit on Monday Night Football, which ended his San Francisco career before he went on to Kansas City for 93 and 94. But this was Joe Montana's last start as a San Francisco 49 before they fully handed the reins over to Steve Young. And of course, Bill Parcells and the Giants, as I mentioned, a couple weeks later, in the midst of the Gulf War and all that, they beat the Buffalo Bills in Super Bowl 25, 20-19 to capture their second Super Bowl in franchise history. But in significance of this game, Lakina, the Giants were underdogs. Remember, they beat the Bears the week before by a lot. I believe they shut them out at Old Giants Stadium.
Yeah, like
Coming
20,
into that game, the Giants
like
were big.
24 to,
Yeah.
yeah, like 24-0 or something like that. I don't know the exact score, but
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, the Giants were big underdogs. So people didn't think they had enough to go through a playoff run because they ended the regular season on a tough stretch. Of course, as I mentioned, Phil Simms getting hurt. But the 49ers, they were on the cusp of history. The Giants stopped that. And like I said, it was one of the most physical games I ever watched. And just like everybody else, I was shocked the way that game ended. But it gave the Giants confidence. And like I said, you saw what happened 2 weeks later. They beat the favorite Buffalo Bills to win the Super Bowl. Of course, Bill Belichick, who was the defensive coordinator of the Giants at the time, he went on to coach the Cleveland Browns. Of course, the Parcells had that heart issue. He retired from coaching briefly in May of that offseason. But this game alone was a physical game. No team gave an inch. The 49ers were known as the team of the 80s. The Giants, as I mentioned, no one gave them a shot. They stood toe-to-toe with the 49ers, not the 49ers right out of the playoffs. The 49ers didn't even make it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, 13-12 was the final score there. And, of course, Leonard Marshall actually knocked Montana out of the game during that time. And, yeah, it was, it was definitely a bruising. You saw all the, there will be no three-peat, as the late Pat Summerall said, as the Giants celebrated that game. And this is sort of like, because remember, the Giants, it wasn't like the Giants were terrible. They were 13-3. The only problem was that the 49ers were dominant. They were 14-2. That year, and it was definitely one of those games where a lot of people, if betting were really a thing, or if it was legal back then, I'm sure there would have been a lot of people that
it was illegal outside of Vegas.
So unfortunately that whole thing kind of started happening, and you saw the blood. It was really blood and stuff coming on afterwards. And we saw the America's game. You heard what Jeff Hostetler said of it. I know he heard it from a lot of the pundits saying that, like you said, I think it was like week 15 or week 14 or 15, Sims got hurt. Of course, he had to step in, and a lot of people thought that maybe he couldn't do it against that because the 49ers defense were actually really solid. So a lot of people thought that he was going to have a hard time against them. He didn't. He actually played very well. Now again, I think it was like 3 field goals from Matt Bear that game. But look, to the Giants' credit, they were able to come in and perhaps kind of they set the tone of the game. They knocked Montana out, and they were able to kind of overcome all that, and they ended up, of course, like I said, a couple of weeks later, winning the Super Bowl against Buffalo.
And let's not forget Roger Craig, who I believe is in the Hall of Fame, but at the time he came the first running back to have 1,000 yards receiving and 1,000 yards rushing in the same year. He fumbled too in that game.
Yeah, he did.
And that was another big turning point in that game as well.
Yeah, so it was definitely a defensive struggle there. I know Lawrence Taylor, I remember he still mentioned this even still, that probably one of his best, probably one of his favorite playoff wins was because of the fact that they were the 49ers were the big favorites, and they had to hear from people saying that they didn't have a shot. So, they imposed their will, and they were able to pull it off late.
Yeah, so 34 years ago today, we paid tribute to the 1990 NFC Championship game as the San Francisco 49ers go down to the New York Football Giants 15-13. Of course, as we mentioned a couple of weeks later, that 1990 New York Giants team defeated the Buffalo Bills 2 weeks later to capture Super Bowl 25. That's the sports side of Old School TV Monday. Now, let's get into the non-sports side of Old School TV Monday as we honor MLK Day. We talked about this over the weekend, looking as we give people a little peek behind the scenes, behind the curtain, as G Hood would say. And today we'll pay tribute to the documentary 80 Years of R&B, 80 Years of No Respect. It's the documentary you can catch on YouTube. It was released about 4 months ago. Of course, it talks about the history, how R&B was created, how the industry really didn't respect it. It was they talked about how the birth of rock and roll became because of the R&B genre, and then they talked interview. It's not just a collection of old interviews, but they're really going deep in depth with the artists that they were interviewed back there, the stories, how they what they went through from the 50s rock and roll era to the 60s of Motown through the 70s of the Stax and Chess Records, and of course through today's times in the 80s and 90s with the whole evolution of hip hop, and of course all some of the artists that were interviewed for that documentary were Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin. They talked about the late great Jackie Wilson, some of those old school artists that were never had their due because signing bad contracts when they were teenagers and the record industry taking advantage of them. But now it was a campaign over the last 15 20 years about having an R&B Music Hall of Fame, in which they do have now, and they have information on that doc at the end of that documentary if you want to contribute. But Lakina, some of the stuff that those artists went through, some of that stuff I already knew, some of the stuff I didn't know, but looking at it again over the weekend, some of the stuff really made me angry. But the story must be told throughout. And one of the historians on that documentary said, some of the stuff that we believed to have what have happened, we were told as kids, it started to come to fruition that some of that stuff didn't happen, and some of the stories that was told in that documentary, it was really kept in the background for a long time. I'm glad most of the stuff was documented so for everybody could see.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those things where there were a lot of stuff about them not wanting to play R&B music for many years, and it actually took a couple of local DJs from, I think it was Cleveland, I think it was one other Midwestern city
Memphis
well.
too in Atlanta.
Memphis too in Atlanta, yep. And that part of it was sort of they didn't want to play black music for in those stations, for obvious reasons, especially in the South. But again, we won't digress. We won't fully digress on that. But yeah, it wasn't until people started, they started showing some of those R&B songs, and dare I say, white people started buying those records kind of in secret, especially in those southern areas. So it was definitely one of those things where, yeah, it will make you angry. I will say that. It's about a 45, 50-minute documentary. So there are going to be some minutes where you'll be a little bit pissed, but, you'll end up playing along, and it all kind of makes sense as you get really into it.
Yeah, not to give too much of it away, but some of those rock and roll artists that were black rock and roll artists that would get their due respect later, like Jackie Wilson or Little Richard or Ray Charles. Though their songs were covered by white artists, and at that time, those white artists got the royalties for those songs, because you mentioned, especially in the Deep South, they weren't comfortable seeing black faces performing those songs. Those artists, those black artists I just mentioned, set up for not just what we have in copyrights laws and all that stuff in the music industry today, but it set up the template for what black artists follow. As I mentioned, with the Motown of the 60s, they came in after that with the Stax records in Philadelphia and Chess records in the 70s. They all followed that model. And as we mentioned, R&B music, we especially with those Motown songs of the 60s and 70s, we hear them in commercials, hear them in movies, you hear them all over the place. You even hear them on some NBA broadcasts today, especially on ESPN. I digress, but this genre of music has birthed everything from not just rock and roll, but country music as well, alternative rock, if you really want to dive deep into that. Of course, disco and hip hop music that started in the late 70s into the 80s or so. This genre of music birthed just about all forms of music that we come to know we come to know today.
Well, you can also say that the reverse kind of happened too when it came to white artists, because remember Michael McDonald. I remember when he did a duet with Patti LaBelle. I mean, I remember he said
On My Own, yes, 86.
Yeah, and I remember he said that he caught a lot of flack from artists for that duet. And I remember Tina Marie, God rest her soul. Remember when she came out, Rick James, of course, they became her mentor and such. Remember, they didn't put her face in that album either, because they were afraid that black artists would not respond to a white artist singing R&B music. So it goes both ways in that respect. Maybe not to that extent, but yeah, it does go both ways. The blue-eyed soul, as they call it, and it's sort of one of those things where, like in R&B, especially if you remember, like a lot of those Motown songs and even those 70s songs. I forgot what song was played during that Illinois Michigan State game yesterday, and it was definitely R&B is definitely one of those songs where after 80 years is finally starting to get their due. And you guys said, like you said, some of those artists are finally in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, oddly enough. But I think it came, but again, awards wise, unfortunately, I think the last like real R&B album that actually won a Grammy for album of the year. I mean, would you call that John Batiste album from a couple years back? Would you consider that R&B? Not really. I think if you ask him, it's more of like a fusion of R&B and rock and adult contemporary and those type of things. So yeah, it's been a long time since I guess an R&B album has won album of the year over at the Grammys.
Yeah, I know. We can talk about today's music, and I don't want to lose too much of it. Like I said, respectful to this day. We can get to that conversation at another time. But this genre of music is birth, like I said, all forms of music and different types of artists as well. Michael Jackson. You mentioned Tina Marie, Rick James. We can go on and on, but I'm glad to finally see we have a R&B Hall of Fame. Of course, Hall of Notes is in it. Some of the artists you'll see in this documentary are in it as well. So I'm going to end the R&B Hall of Fame. Of course, we have a rock and roll. We have a rock and roll Hall of Fame, which is based in Cleveland. We have a country music Hall of Fame, which is based in Nashville. But we finally have an R&B Hall of Fame, and it's great. So for those of you that are interested, just type in on your YouTube engine searches, or you just Google it, R&B 80 Years of No Respect. The documentary came out 4 months ago. It's a great documentary. For those of you that have today off with your kids, watch it with your kids. Teach them this is what the history is all about. Where the music industry started to where it is now. Please go watch it. Please, please, please. I'll give it 2 thumbs up. If I've had 10 thumbs, I'll give it 10 thumbs up. So once again, type it in your search engine boxes on YouTube. R&B 80 Years, No Respect.
Yeah, it's 50. Like I said, it's 50 minutes, just under 50 minutes. It's great. You're gonna learn a lot. You're listening to some great songs from the 50s on to you say to today's R&B. So yeah, it's worth it. It's worth the watch, folks. It's great for the whole family.
Especially on a day like today on MLK Day. So please, especially over those parents that have children, you're looking for something on television. Type in on your YouTube engine searches, R&B 80 Years No Respect on YouTube. Watch it. Like Lakina said, you'll get a great education. You'll get a great lesson. And maybe it's something that you heard as a child that you missed, or they didn't say, oh, that didn't make sense back then. You'll kind of make that connection. So check it out whenever you can, especially on a day like today on YouTube. R&B 80 Years No Respect.
That's for Old School TV Monday.
Yes. All right, Lakina, take us home.
All right, on that note, you can follow my Keena McGee on the Twitter, execute again, IG.
You can follow Shirley City Brown on the Twitter, X, and the IG at CKid80. Once again, it's CKid80. That's SIDKID80. SIDKID80. Be sure to download that Sports Zone Chicago app wherever you get your apps. Please follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, and YouTube. Please subscribe to our podcast. We are located at Ward Media Podcast. That's WARR Media, PODCASTS. We are on all podcast platforms, including the iHeartRadio app. And while you're ready, please give Ward Media a follow at WARR Media on all social media platforms. And thank you very much in advance for your support.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
Be sure to catch Second City Sports live in the living color every Monday, every Friday from noon to 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, right here on Sports Zone Chicago. One more again, as the kids would say. Be sure to catch Second City Sports live in the living color every Monday, every Friday from noon to 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, right here on Sports Zone Chicago.
And of course, you can catch Sports Zone Chicago anytime, anywhere. Catch replays on Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook, YouTube channel. You can catch replays of our show, Sean and Maya, the Smoke Fellas, and so much more. Make sure to catch Sports Zone Chicago anytime, anywhere on the Sports Zone Chicago app, as well as the Facebook and YouTube channels.
And we will provide.
And of course, folks, do those remembrance and stay warm out there. It's freezing for most of the country for the next couple of days. So please, like I said, if you have to go out in the weather, stock up on hot beverages and such. So you stay warm and bundle up and to get through this poor vortex.
And we'd like to thank Miss Cheryl Raye Stout from WBEZ FM 91.5 in Chicago, the A Sports reporter, for joining us today on the program, discussing Chicago Bears coaching search, Chicago sports, and more.
All right. So for Sin, I'm Lakina. This has been Second City Sports on Sports of Chicago. Stay safe, stay warm, and we'll see you guys on Friday.
Holla.